Welcome to Build. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri. My next guest has been covering Donald Trump for over 20 years. In 2001, he won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting, and today he is here to talk to us about his new book, It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America. Before we talk to David Cay Johnston, I want to remind our audiences at home they can leave a question with the Submit a Question button right next to the video. For now, everybody please welcome David Cay Johnston. Let's say hi.
I'm going to have to be one of those nitpicking reporters.
Over 20 years?
30 years.
30 years. Yeah.
30 years come May.
30 years. So going to be are you going to send him a card, an anniversary card or anything? Maybe a cake?
I thought maybe he'd send me one.
What did he call you? He called you a weird dude?
A weird dude, yes. And he said, been following me for 25 years, always a hit job, and I'm president, so he didn't do a very good job.
Do you feel like he has a point there?
He's president, and I don't think he should be.
Same. So let's talk about why you started covering him, and then get into exactly what the administration is doing to America, as your book says.
Well, I had exposed the LAPD and a whole lot of other institutions in LA that the LA Times didn't want to expose. And when I had to leave because it was just untenable, I decided I wanted to cover the casino industry in Atlantic City because I thought casino gambling was going to explode across the country, which it did. Met Donald Trump in May of 1988 right off the bat and went, "Hey, that's P.T. Barnum. Come and see the Fiji Mermaid and the amazing two-headed woman." What I quickly learned was, A, he didn't know anything about the casino business, which I didn't believe at first, but then I interviewed him and found out he didn't. And B, I began to realize that, well, P.T. Barnum ran hoaxes. He didn't hurt anybody. You paid him a quarter and you got taken in. Donald was both stupid and malicious. He didn't know anything, and he hurt people all over the place. He refused to pay people. He would denigrate people. He had no regard for anybody else.
And at that point, that was when you started covering him, and you talk about your first interview with Donald Trump, the first time you sat down and talked to him.
Well, I sat down with him after a lot of preparation, and one of the things I did, something investigative reporters often do, was...
You realized you didn't have to do any of that preparation whatsoever, just had to have cursory knowledge of what you were talking about.
But with the help of his own guys, I crafted 4 questions about the gambling business. And Donald, in all 4 cases, took my language and incorporated it into his answer. Well, you know, that's what you see on TV. Hi, we're the California psychics. We're the real psychics who will tell you if your boyfriend really loves you or not. That's the same technique. And I realized he's a con artist. He's a grifter. This is a fraud. And when I broke the story that he wasn't a billionaire, he said, "Oh, I've got $3 billion. Yeah, well, how come you can't pay your bills?" He denounced me as a liar, and then 4 months later, he had to put his financial statement into the public record. Showed a negative net worth of $232 million. So at the Philadelphia Inquirer, where I worked at the time, we ran the story across the top of the front page, above the masthead, and the lead was roughly this: "You are probably worth more than Donald Trump."
Now, Donald Trump, I agree, is a complete con artist. What makes him, for lack of a better definition, a successful con artist is that he was given so much capital to start with. What makes a con
Well, he's also worked at his craft. Give him credit for this. I mean, Donald is the most successful con artist in the history of the world. Look where it got him, because he's worked at it. He's worked at how to plant fake news. He's worked at how to intimidate organizations to not report about things like his deep involvement with an international cocaine trafficker who's a convicted felon. He has worked very hard at planting news stories that, like, you know, he planned all these stories about his affair with Marla Maples. Billionaire or supposed billionaire has mistress. Shocking! Airplane takes off in New York and lands in Los Angeles. Shocking!
Now, one of the things that I like about your book, especially in the moment that it's coming out, is it's kind of the opposite to Michael Wolff's book, which came out last week or the week before.
The other side of the coin. They complement each other.
Yeah, they kind of do. I mean, one of them is the gossip and is the kind of the emotional aspect of the Trump administration. And yours is...
And it also confirms everything in my book that came out 2 years ago, The Making of Donald Trump. That was, when I went through his book, I went, "Hey, this is great. I'm right, I'm right, I'm right."
Well, that's also kind of what, not to slag on Michael Wolff so much, that's kind of what bothered me a little bit about his book, which is that was like, if you had been reading the news or other books in the last 2 years, all of this has been been reported and talked about. He just gained a couple interviews where Steve Bannon somehow went on record.
Well, one of my 8 children said to me, "Gee, do you think he went through your book and just posed questions out of the book?" And I went, "Yeah, possibly."
So what is it?
He's a gossip reporter. I'm a policy and investigative reporter.
Well, you are doing what I would say, I think personally, is the important reporting right now.
Thank you.
It is fun to give Donald Trump crap and make fun of him and talk about his shortcomings, but actually talking about what he is doing to this country right now is far more important. And so let's start with talking about the appointees and the sort of destruction of the administrative state, as Steve Bannon put it.
Well, Trump has, first of all, not filled all sorts of positions. There are ambassadorships all over the world where there's no ambassador there, which means that when trade deals are made or there are matters of national security, we don't have somebody at the table. But more importantly, there are what I call political termites that he has loosed into the government, and the structure of our government is being eaten away at by these people. They're forcing people to retire or making life uncomfortable for them so they'll leave, refusing to let them do their work. They turned a government executive in the Interior Department, a senior executive who had helped Native Americans in Alaska whose island was about to be flooded to move a little bit inland. He now processes oil royalty payment checks. They put in place people who are completely against the duties of that agency. Polluters are now basically running the Environmental Protection Agency. People who want to despoil the public lands are running Interior. And if you're a student, this is really bad news for you because Donald's administration has taken the side of the bankers against the students. And among other things, who did they bring in to deal with student loans? Well, the very predators who created the problem.
I want to go back to the ambassadorships that haven't been filled yet. Do you think that that is intentional? Like, so often it is attributed to Donald just watching TV and not doing this, but do you think it's an intentional lack of filling these roles because they are trying to not have somebody at the table when these big business deals are going on?
Yes. Rex Tillerson, who's the head of ExxonMobil, which it's in a nasty business, but it's a very well-managed company. They have their own private diplomatic corps. They have their own private military.
They run as a country.
Yeah, and they're country. And they clearly are not happy with when they get run-in interference from the American diplomatic corps. So Rex Tillerson has been systematically working to undermine the State Department. And you know, if you apply for the State Department, you know what your odds are of getting through the whole process and being found smart enough and hardworking enough to get hired? It's about 3%. Leaving these positions vacant enhances the power of people like Rex Tillerson and his friends and oil companies. But more importantly than that, in some ways, is Donald's lazy. He's always been lazy. We now know from reporting by other people that he comes to work at about 11 a.m., leaves at about 4:15, and has lunch. You know, that's not how presidents work.
Golf's 3 days a week.
3 days a week, yes. Martin Luther King Day, we're going to show our solidarity with...
I am not a racist. Happy Martin Luther King Day. You can find me beyond the ninth hole.
Right.
Yeah. When it comes to his laziness, though, is that something that we should be... Because and this goes back to Fire and Fury and all of the things that we're outraged about when it comes to Trump all the time. Do you think we are too outraged all the time and outraged over the wrong things? Like, should we spend a 2-week news cycle talking about shit houses versus shit holes?
I don't know that we should spend that much time with it, but we should be very disturbed about the cabinet officer who runs Homeland Security, Christian, if I'm pronouncing it right, Nielsen, and Senator Tom Cotton, a former military officer, lying and denying about what's going on.
I've never not been disturbed by Tom Cotton, so.
But he holds himself out as a paragon of virtue. What we should be, we focus a lot on what is going on in the White House because, first of all, it's an interesting story. It's like a train wreck. I mean, Donald Trump's campaign was like a car crash we all slow down to see with, in addition, a marching band, dancing girls, and fireworks. And the same thing's taking place in the White House. I mean, how can you turn away from this? But it causes us to miss the damage that's being done to, and remember, it's our government. I really dislike that newspapers and TV refer to the government and the Constitution. It's our government. It's our Constitution. Donald Trump is our subordinate. He is our employee who we've temporarily invested with power. And we need to keep that in mind. Donald, of course, is a dictator in waiting in his own mind.
Yes. And I don't even think he knows that he's a dictator. He doesn't know what a dictator is. He's just, it's all just emotional and you know, off the seat of his pants for him.
Well, the Trump administration, I point out in the book, is different from all previous administrations. We've had corrupt presidents, murderous presidents. When Andrew Jackson's picture, you know, looks down on Donald Trump in the Oval Office. We've had
looks down on him while he's greeting Navajo Indians, right?
Right. We've had good presidents, middling presidents, but all of them tried to make the country better. Whether they succeeded or failed is another story. Donald Trump is about one thing. Donald Trump, period, full stop.
I agree with you 100%, but Republicans are not doing anything to fix this. Right. They are actually advancing and I would ask is they're advancing an agenda in my mind that does even more to sort of pollute and disrupt the Republic. Do you think that Donald Trump is actually just the sort of natural conclusion of the rhetoric and the beliefs of the Republican Party over the last 20 years?
I don't think he's the conclusion. That's the problem. He may be the start. Imagine somebody who doesn't have Donald's deficits. Somebody who isn't nutty and a jerk.
Paul Ryan.
And yeah, that would be a reasonably good example, running and promoting the kind of society that Donald Trump wants. And Paul Ryan's a great example of that because basically Paul Ryan, who goes to Mass every week, hates poor people. He somehow didn't listen to the in catechism class. So Donald could be the beginning rather than the end. The one thing that I didn't anticipate...
The beginning of a new Republican Party or the beginning of the end of the Republican Party?
The beginning of a new era in which if Americans don't get out and vote and do something about it, we will drift toward being a fascist country and move there very quickly when somebody who's competent, unlike Donald, promotes the kinds of things he's doing. Everything Donald has done is what I predicted, and there's public record of me on what I said would happen, and I've been pretty much right on the mark. What I did not at all anticipate was the cravenness of the congressional Republican leadership, that they would lie, deny, cover up, engage in subterfuge, sabotage the investigations about the Russians. I mean, when I went to high school in the 60s, if a high school civics teacher had said, the day will come when a Republican president will praise the leader in the Kremlin and attack American intelligence agencies, and the leading Republicans in America will back him up, I would have gone straight to the principal's office and said, this guy needs to have a psychiatric evaluation. That's what's going on.
No, you know, we're drifting a little bit away from some of the stuff that's in your book, but I do want to follow up on something that you just said, which is that we are sort of moving towards fascism. It's
we could be.
But I want to ask you why you think, because so often I think people think of fascism as just this thing based off of prejudice, based off of hate, when in actuality...
Fascism means corporations run the show.
Thank you. There was actually, like, the Nazi Party was actually funded in large part by industrialists.
Right. And the founders of this country didn't like corporations. There were only 7 corporations in British colonial America. 6 of them today we would call public utilities or charitable organizations, the Boston Water Works, and there was one, exactly one, created for the purpose of making money, and it was such a disaster they had to shut it down. The New Haven, then New Haven colony had to shut it down, and it took 10 years to clean up the mess. But what matters is people turning out to vote. And particularly if you're 18 to 25, what the hell? If you don't vote, you're not deciding the future of your country. And if you're in a district where you've been corralled, you know, it's all people who think like you, well, vote and then go to a district where there's a possibility of getting somebody out who you don't like. Drive people to the polls, do the work. But if we don't do the work of being citizens, the people who profit off government, who I wrote about in my earlier books, they are going to continue to be in charge, and to your detriment, and your liberties are going to go away.
Can I play, I agree with you 100%, but can I play devil's advocate with that for just a second? Because I think a lot of people in this country believe that there are Democratic lobbyists as well. There are Democrats who profit off of being in government, and so often one of the Republicans' tools that's used for battling Democrats is the idea that these people make money off of being in government. Your tax dollars are funding more lawyers, more
Ricky, I say this as somebody who runs a business and co-founded a successful business. It's much easier to make money by mining the government rule book and the Treasury than it is to earn it in the marketplace. And the Democrats have to go to the same well of people I call the political donor class to raise money. It's a very narrow group of people.
A lot of times corporations.
So there's really one political party in Washington. It's the Green Party, the Greenback Party. And the only difference is that one wing of it is socially liberal and the other wing is socially conservative. That's the difference. And we need to recognize that we need a government. Donald Trump, ran for president on the economic platform I articulated in my trilogy, Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, The Fine Print, that government is causing this upward redistribution through these hidden rules nobody knew about till I spent years and years digging them out and turning them into plain English. And the 90% have a legitimate grievance. Their incomes today are virtually the same as they were in 1967, the year I graduated from high school. That's wrong. But if you don't vote, guess what? You don't get to choose. If you don't know the issues and really understand them, you're going to get tricked. And when I was in high school, there was a company called Brill Cream that told you if you put this stuff in your hair, girls would be all over you. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And you know what? They sold a tremendous amount of Brill Cream because advertising works.
You think Donald Trump is the Brill Cream? He's
well,
the Brill Cream?
The cover, which I love, is, it's a choice. Do you think America's on fire or that's Donald's hair on fire?
I want to talk specifically about Foxconn in Wisconsin because you bring it up in your book, and I'm so glad that you did. For those of you who don't know, Foxconn is a company in China that makes a lot of the parts that go into iPhones. They're known for sort of brutalizing their employees. And
working people to the point they commit suicide.
Yeah, and so Wisconsin has put up about, what, $4 or $5 billion in tax dollars?
Offered, originally at the time I wrote the book, it was $3 billion. Apparently it's now up to about $4.5 billion. And I don't think, until I wrote my book, Free Lunch, most people didn't know that, a third of Walmart stores are built with your tax dollars. Their whole shopping center is built with your tax dollars. That local businesses, why are they disappearing, being replaced by national chains? Because your tax dollars are putting up the capital. General Electric rebuilt its jet engine factory in Ohio. How did they do it? Well, 20 states, including Ohio, allow corporations to tax their workers.
This is what
people don't know this.
This is what Chomsky calls corporate socialism.
Yes, it's right? What I call corporate socialism, right? And my books champion competitive markets and real capitalism, not corporate socialism, in which the winners get to keep the profits and the losers shove the costs onto us. And if we're going to invest in companies, or we're going to pay for General Electric's factory, well, then we should get a pro rata share of the profits. I mean, I don't think we should pay for it, but if we're going to pay for it, why do we get nothing? Why shouldn't we get a pro rata share of the profits?
Now, when it comes to Foxconn, essentially, what I didn't know, and your book says this, is that all of this is like a one sheet. It's almost like a handshake deal at this point. It's not even true. It might not even come to fruition, even though Donald Trump has already taken credit for this.
If you want to buy a jet, you'll get a contract from the floor to here if you're Delta Airlines. Yeah. But if you want a $4 billion subsidy, there'll be one piece of paper on which people have written notes and crossed out and upped the numbers. And this is just crazy. It's throwing away the public's money. And the worst of these deals are often done by the politicians who claim to be the champion of the taxpayers, who I've been writing about and looking out for 50 years. So
do you think Foxconn is a sort of great symbol, though, of exactly how Trump is, or the Republican Party, how they view jobs and how they bring jobs to this country, that it's actually at the detriment to the workers and to the taxpayer, and at the same time, they are able to, I would say, manipulate the media and manipulate the headlines to make it look as if they are looking out for the benefit of those.
Well, when it comes to journalists, remember that most journalists accurately quote what people say. They may not know what they're talking about, right, but they accurately quote what they say. They don't have a deep understanding of how things work, okay? And once you know that, it's easy to manipulate journalists, especially political reporters, or I prefer to call them politics reporters. In the case of jobs and things, the Trump administration has people focused on, we're going to create these jobs. Look at the bonuses people got because of the tax bill. No connection whatsoever, and paid out when the tax rate was 35%, not 21%, so they got a bigger government benefit out of it.
But also, so many of those corporations were coming out and saying that it was because of the tax cut. I didn't understand that.
Which is nonsense. Absolutely not true. And
why do these corporations feel the need to defend the tax cut like this?
Because it's in their interest to sell you that. I mean, that's the whole point of, you go on a blind date, and you go, hi, well, I live at home with my mom and we have cats. You put on, hey, I'm this really cool guy and here's why. So in the case of workers, my book details all of these things where Donald Trump, who said the forgotten man was going to be protected. People's lives are being put in danger. People's incomes are going to go down because of what they're doing over time, not tomorrow. people who are truck drivers and bus drivers who have sleep apnea. They're not going to be tested as Obama wanted to do. Well, people are going to die because of that. The drivers themselves and whoever unluckily is driving down the road when the bus driver goes off to sleep for 3 seconds.
We'll talk about what's going on at the Department of Labor and at OSHA, some of the things that you're kind of bringing up right now.
Well, Congress required a minimum number of OSHA job safety inspectors. They're below that number. They're not hiring. They're pressuring people to leave. They have not posted a death of a worker since August 17th on the Department of Labor website. 4,800 workers a year die. They're not enforcing the laws on worker safety. And as a result, we're going to have other things happen. People will develop illnesses. We've known since the Romans that silica dust causes lung disease and kills you. They've delayed implementation of the rule on silica dust. And so it's just fundamental to recognize that Donald Trump ran for office saying, I'm going to drain the swamp, and then he decided to turn Washington, D.C. into a federally protected paradise for the most predatory billionaires around, stocked it with Goldman Sachs clients. And by the way, the tax bill, the first version was 100 words. What we're going to do was a shopping list for Goldman Sachs clients. Then they put out a 9-page paper, which as a professor, I would have turned back and said, excuse me, that's a 4-page paper with a lot of white space. But it was also just an extended shopping list for Goldman Sachs clients, and then they passed the complete shopping list for Goldman Sachs clients.
Right, weren't there just sort of lobbyist stuff being thrown in the night of, like pre-written in the bill?
And we're already finding that there are loopholes that are in there, some of which I'm positive were created deliberately, and tax is my main area of work. But there are others that were unintended that are going to be discovered and we're going to learn about to our detriment. You know, Donald says he's the world's greatest expert on taxes. Well, he also has testified under oath and knows nothing about accounting. Well, saying you don't know accounting but you're an expert on taxes is like saying I'm a race car driver but I've never put the key in the ignition.
You know, I want to play stupid devil's advocate one more time for you because I imagine what
I'd rather you play a smart devil's advocate.
I can't because the devil's advocate argument is dumb, but I can hear someone say it, which is like, sure, yeah, we've removed regulations when it comes to OSHA, when it comes to Department of Labor, when it comes to all these other factors of government, but we are Republicans, that's what we do. We believe that regulations tamper companies from being able to make money, and that money being lost doesn't create
jobs.
Ricky,
you know who writes most regulations? Companies. The Interstate Commerce Act that regulated railroads, the first big regulatory law, the railroads asked for it. America had a Pure Meat Act in 1890 when Upton Sinclair hadn't imagined riding the jungle. Remember, Sinclair said, I tried to shoot an arrow into America's heart and hit its stomach. So then Congress in 1890 passed a Pure Meat Act, but only for exports to Europe. Well, after he wrote his book, they wrote a nationwide Pure Meat Act and Pure Food Act. And who asked for it? The industries. Companies want to be regulated. Everything is regulated and always has. I used to teach regulation at Syracuse Law. I'm not a lawyer, but I taught law there for 8 years. And Hammurabi's Code is full of regulation of business. When you have to have witnesses, what documents you have to have. There's even a special rule for taverns run by women that doesn't apply to taverns run by men. That's how finally they regulated things 4,000 years ago. And those regulations we have, I'm not suggesting they're perfect, they're not, but they got put there for a reason. They get put there just like the regulation that applied to taverns owned by women because experience showed, here's a problem, there's some bad actors, we can't clean it up otherwise, so we're going to have a rule to deal with it.
Now, when it comes to essentially every chapter, which it covers a different subject about what the administration is doing to this country, I think the sort of underlying theme of each one, whether it's on the surface or if it's subtext, is a belief in money above all else. Would you agree with that?
And bless his soul, Eric Trump said within the last 24 hours on Fox, oh, my dad's all about money. Which is exactly right. He's all about money. He's not even about his family. He's about money.
This is a tangent.
Or imagined money.
I saw that interview, and my favorite part of that interview was when he misused the word metaphor. That was my. They're so stupid.
But they're geniuses. They're genetically superior geniuses. Like as Donald says, I'm like a smart person.
But I think it's a mistake once again, though, to sort of relate the belief in money above all else to just the Trump and the Trump family. We talk about Gorsuch, we talk about Ryan, we talk about Trump. But Gorsuch's idea that like he's a constitutionalist, he's not. He's not an originalist.
Not only is he not a constitutionalist, but the most famous case he wrote a dissent on was about a truck driver whose truck broke down. He was running out of fuel, and he was told to wait. And he almost froze to death, only because a friend called him on his cell phone. Did he wake up? And so he unhitched the truck and drove it away and found warmth and didn't die. And Gorsuch wrote an opinion that said, no, he should have stayed there. That is, you got to die or you can be fired from your job. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible human being that we have on the Supreme Court. And we're going to get more of them if anybody in the court leaves now, because Donald will be perfectly happy to appoint people like that. Donald has no regard for anyone else. You are an object to him. You are not a person. You're an object. And he spent his whole life using people, cheating them, and then like a locust moving on to the next victim. Well, he can't do that anymore. He doesn't get to replace the dictator in North Korea with somebody he wants. He doesn't get to replace a federal judge he doesn't want. And he doesn't know how to operate in an environment of people who have their own power centers and their own legitimate interests.
So this is what the Trump administration is doing to America is also stuff that we're not exactly feeling right now, but we are going to feel greatly in a few years if we don't get out there and vote. But even if we do get out there and vote, do you think that the next president, the next administration, if they are someone who is opposed to, for instance, this tax bill, there is enough that they can do to repeal certain elements of it?
The Trump administration will not end well, no matter what happens. If he will never be removed by the 25th Amendment, it doesn't work. If he is impeached and convicted, that's because the Democrats are in control, and if Nancy Pelosi is Speaker, she's the president, all sorts of people are going to scream coup d'etat. Donald will go around the country fomenting violence and revolution. I mean, after all, he had no trouble saying, hey, beat that guy up, beat this guy up, beat that person up in the audience. Imagine if he's illegitimately, in his mind, removed from office, what he would do. If he remains in office, we got Supreme Court appointments coming up and other actions. What matters is that we not only
only make it till 2020.
that we get not only get a new, she can do more push-ups than I can, that we get significant majorities of people who care about the American people. And we got to reduce the influence of the political donor class, which corrupts everyone, and we need to recognize that. The post-Watergate campaign contribution reforms completely backfired. I was out writing about them back then. I thought they were going to be great. Man, they were awful. They've taken away power from ordinary people, and they've put it in the hands of a narrow group of people like the Koch brothers, Robert Mercer, who says his cats are worth more than most Americans. And so if people wake up and recognize it's our government and we get the government we deserve, we'll get a better government. But if we don't, well, you know, too bad. Sorry, it was a nice experiment while it lasted.
I have a question for you. Something that you just said about Nancy Pelosi. If Trump is impeached, why do you think Nancy Pelosi will become president?
If you remove Trump because of the Russians, don't you have to remove Mike Pence as well? I mean, that's going to be a great issue because he's the beneficiary of it. Why would
Paul Ryan?
Well, no, he's Speaker of the House now. Trump will never be impeached.
I got you.
He'll only be impeached if the Democrats are in control. Presumably, Nancy will become. Yes, and so the Speaker is next in line, right? And so these are legitimate, serious issues. Yeah. You know, do you want Mike Pence to be the next president or not? And if you're a woman, you really want to think a lot about that question. Yeah. So,
do we want dumb or do we want just straight fascist?
I think what we want...
Fascist by way of dumb or fascist by way of belief?
We want serious people who prepared to do this. We've got to stop denigrating certain groups of people. We denigrate teachers, you know, those who can do, and those who can't teach. Nonsense. We need...
Summer's off.
Right. We need to have politicians whose job is public service. And we need to do it in a way that they aren't forced to sell their souls to raise money. And we can do these things. You know, the great thing about our Constitution, we can amend it. We started out in a country where it was legal to own human beings. What a despicable thing. Even then, many people thought despicable, but it was a compromise. We got rid of that. We got child labor laws. We got laws that allowed unions, and we've let them atrophy. We've done a whole bunch of good things. Progress is not steady, you know. We've got all sorts of imperfections and wrongs. But the quality of the government we have, we choose that. And we're responsible for it. That's the whole idea of self-governance. You say somebody else can do it for me, you get Donald Trump.
Do you think that we need to put greater laws in place to restrict presidents and those in office all over the place from receiving money, not just from foreign governments, but from corporations?
Well, we already have a constitution with both domestic and foreign emoluments clauses that Donald just thumbs his nose at, and nothing is being done about it. There are 3 places the Constitution references emoluments. You should go read them. You should all go read the Constitution. Actually sit down and read it. 4,000 words, 7,000 with the amendments. And what we need to do is find people who are acting in the public interest. You know, Elizabeth Warren, whom I've known for 30 years, she's never going to be president of the United States in all likelihood, but she is the most model public servant I have ever known in my life. She thinks about and cares about ordinary people, and she's not in this for herself. And we need to develop people like that. We need to have a class of people who are responsive to us, but they'll only be responsive to us if we're actively involved. We have to find the time to be involved, and we have to find the commitment among ourselves to be informed.
Let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question?
Hello.
Hi there.
I have a question. I would like to know how this government affect the immigrants, because I have heard many things, but I would like to know what reality we are facing. Yes.
Thank you. What's your name?
Jasmine.
Jasmine. Well, Jasmine, one of the things I describe in my book is that the best research shows the best way to build the economy in America is to double the number of immigrants to this country and have no regard for their education or their background. Why? Because the people who get up and come here are ambitious. By their very nature, it tells you, my ancestors who came from Norway and Ireland and France came here because they were ambitious and they wanted to be better off. And yours did too if your parents live here, or your grandparents, your great-grandparents. And the research shows trying to cherry pick people based on education isn't going to produce the results you want. What we need to have is a president who's not a bigot. And Donald's been a racist his whole life, and the only way he's not a racist is if your definition is you have to go out and kill somebody. Donald has been found in judicial proceedings and other proceedings to have discriminated. He's said and written all sorts of things over the years. And immigration policy in this country was better under Ronald Reagan, who had what amounted to an amnesty. And a little story, just if I can, about that.
Please.
People who didn't have the money in Los Angeles to file for their amnesty could go to the California Community Foundation and get a loan. My wife was in charge of this program. Every single dollar got paid back. Didn't all get paid back on time. Some people were slow and some people were late because that's how life works out, but they didn't write off a penny. What does that tell you about the character of the people who wanted to be here?
I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go to the audience again in just a second, but I'm going to ask you, one of the chapters of your book is kleptocracy, and we've kind of touched on it in some ways with how regulation is changing, how Trump is profiting, and how different elements of the government are profiting. Why is it of Republicans' best interest, in their opinion, someone like Paul Ryan or Lindsey Graham, to develop a kleptocracy? Is it just personal greed? Or where does the geopolitical ideology, where is that framed on?
I don't think it's in the interest of the Republicans or the Democrats to have a kleptocracy. And I think one of the biggest mistakes the Republicans are making is not recognizing the damage being done by allowing Donald Trump to profit personally and directly off government. People get elected to Congress and they serve and they go get jobs. I would ban that. I would rather give you a lifetime pension. If you served in Congress for, let's say, 8 years or chaired a committee, that means you had some influence. You weren't just a minor backbencher. I'd rather pay you a pension for life and say you can't ever influence the government again or unless you're an employee of the government. I've argued for years that all meetings that anyone has with a member of Congress or a senator, there should be a record of the meeting. We should keep general discussion, what was the subject discussed, and we should know about it because you and I can't get our congressman on the phone when we want something, but donors can. In fact, I once had a wealthy Republican in my backyard where I made this assertion. He reached in his pocket, it's back when we had flip phones, pushed one button, and he had our congressperson on the phone because he's a big donor. Yeah. We got to break that. We got to break that. members of Congress should be accountable to us, not the political donor class. So the use of government to get rich, which is what Trump's doing right now, nobody has an interest in that. Nobody except the people getting rich.
Agree, the people getting rich, but why is it, and you reference Russia in the book as a kleptocracy. Yes. Why is it that Trump, as well as I think members of his administration, and I would say members of the Republican Party, seem to view Russia and its oligarchy and consolidation of wealth as something to strive for? Just greed? Or is there is there a geopolitical scheme there?
I think it is just greed, and it is unbelievable. No one could have predicted that you would see the Republicans supporting what happened in Russia. Basically, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the wealth of the Russian people was turned over to a narrow group of people, the oligarchs, and some other lesser wealthy people. They just stole it. It's a kleptocracy from top to bottom. And Putin and his gang have been systematically trying to loot the wealth of the West. The whole Icelandic bank scandal was an effort to loot the pension funds of the Netherlands and England. Donald Trump signed a document that allowed the profits from the Trump Soho project, he got 18% of them, to disappear into an Icelandic bank that's under the thumb of an oligarch from Russia. And the Republicans aren't looking at this and saying, boy, what are they going to try and steal next? What disruption are they going to do? Your hair should be on fire over that, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. They don't want to address that because they don't want to address it. I mean, it is one of the great mysteries. And if the voters don't make them pay a very severe price for that, the people who have defended the indefensible here, the people who have lied for Donald Trump, I really think that politically we should say, sorry, you had your opportunity and we're not giving you a second act. You're out of public life.
Yeah. Next question. I agree. Who, right here?
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
I'm Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi. So you seem like a very positive person, even though your subject matter that.
Oh, if you have 8 children, you got to be a total optimist.
That's great, because what I was wondering is, with all the vitriol that sometimes we hear in the media and all the anger that is produced based on this administration, how can a normal person stay positive? I know you mentioned like voting.
That's easy, Shannon. That's easy, because you want to have a better tomorrow. That's why. Because if you get cynical and say, oh, it's all dirty politics, I don't want anything to do with this, you lose. They win. But if you say, I'm going to be involved in this, I am going to take responsibility, Republicans love to say personal responsibility, registered Republican, by the way, you're going to change the course of the country.
Are you really?
Yeah.
As a joke?
For 20 years? No. Just kidding. But I said registered. That's the operative line. It's your government. If you have children someday, it's their welfare we're talking about, and their children's welfare. And this idea that we're powerless, look what just happened in Virginia. Control of the legislature depended on one vote, not a district, control of the legislature. Hillary Clinton, if you read Donna Brazil's book, which was done with a journalist I taught, Danelle Morton, a terrific journalist. If you read it, you realize Hillary Clinton lost because she was so arrogant that she wouldn't listen to people who said, you're not responding to a new kind of political warfare, and wouldn't change her tune. And she wouldn't have been a great president. She would have been the children's president, but she would have been an awful lot better than what we've got, because she's competent. Whether you like her or not, she's competent. Mitt Romney was competent, whether you liked him or not. And Donald Trump is not. And so
George W.?
Yeah, moderately competent. I'll tell you one thing George Bush never did. He never attacked Muslims as a group. He went to Ramadan fast-breaking events, and he was very careful to always say, this is not a war on Muslims. I think he made terrible policy choices, but he acted with thoughtfulness about the impact of what he was doing, unlike Donald, who just screams his hatred of Muslims. So, and Donald doesn't know a Sunni from a Shia and thinks Sikhs apparently are Muslims. But you should be positive about it, because you have the power to do something. And you should be organizing other people and talking to other people and being engaged, because it's our government and it's our Constitution.
Are you, if you don't mind me asking, is you being a registered Republican because you have a sort of core belief in
the primaries where I live there's no point in voting in the Democratic primaries. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you had a core belief in like original conservative philosophy or anything.
Well, no. Well, my politics are very, very complicated. My books promote. I get called a communist by people. I know they haven't read my books, which promote competitive market economics, because so far in human development, it's the best thing we've come up with. And you know, I think the Second Amendment is for people who have long guns. If it doesn't say guns, it says arms. So I want a personal nuclear weapon. Man, nobody's going to mess with me with my little nuclear weapon here in my pocket. But basically, I believe the purpose of this country is to ennoble the human spirit, to see what human beings can become. And in that context, Donald Trump is the anti-Constitution.
Absolutely. David, it's been an honor talking to you, sir. Thank you so much for being here, releasing this book. Is it on shelves now? People can pick it up?
#2 on Amazon and #1 in the German edition.
Oh, fantastic. Why do you think that is?
German language. Well, he's German, you know. And
everybody, please give a round of applause for David Cay Johnston and pick up his book. It's even worse than you think what the Trump administration is doing to America.